The text came on a Tuesday afternoon, right as I was staring down a spreadsheet of Q4 projections. I know it's been ages, but I'm desperate. Can we talk? It was from Jenna, an old college friend, someone I'd shared late-night study sessions with, celebrated birthdays with, lost touch with somewhere in the blur of careers and kids and life. I called her immediately. Her voice broke on the second ring. She was crying, that ragged, exhausted crying of someone who'd been holding it together for too long. Our nonprofit is dying, she said. We're 3 months from closing. The kids we serve, 50 of them, Marcus, they'll have nowhere to go. Let me rewind a bit. I'm Marcus Webb, not to be confused with the tech Marcus from earlier stories. I run a mid-sized wealth management firm in the city. I spend my days looking at spreadsheets, evaluating investments, helping people make smart decisions with their money. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. And it's made me comfortable enough to give back. Jenna and I went to college together. She was the passionate one, the one who organized food drives, volunteered at shelters, actually seemed to care about making the world better. After graduation, we drifted apart. She went into nonprofit work, I went into finance. We'd exchange holiday cards, the occasional Facebook like, but that was it. Then, about 2 years ago, she reached out. She'd started a nonprofit, Bright Horizons, providing after-school programs and mentorship for at-risk kids in underserved communities. She was proud, excited, and looking for advice on setting up a donor structure. I helped her for free, reviewing her incorporation documents, suggesting some initial outreach strategies. It felt good to use my skills for something that mattered. Over the next year, Bright Horizons grew. Jenna sent updates, photos of the kids, testimonials from parents, stories of transformed lives. I was impressed. I started donating small amounts at first, then larger as my business grew. I believed in her. I believed in the mission. Then came the call. The desperate call. Jenna explained that a major grant had fallen through, that they were facing a cash flow crisis, that without an infusion of funds, they'd have to close their doors in 3 months. 50 kids would lose their safe space, their mentorship, their chance. I didn't hesitate. How much do you need? She hesitated. 50,000 would keep us afloat for a year. Give us time to find new grants. 50,000 was a lot of money. But I had it. And I believed in her. I'll wire it tomorrow, I said. No strings attached. Just keep doing what you're doing.
She cried.
Thanked me profusely. Promised to make me proud. I felt good. For about 3 months. The first sign of trouble was a postcard. A month after I wired the money, I got a glossy mailer from Bright Horizons. It was a thank you note to all donors, listing visionary supporters who'd made a significant impact. My name was there right at the top. Below it was a photo of a brand new van with the Bright Horizons logo on the side. The caption, "Thanks to our generous donors, we've purchased a new vehicle to transport kids to and from our programs." I smiled, forwarded it to my wife. Look, our money at work. But something nagged at me. $50,000 was a lot for a van. And the van looked expensive, custom-wrapped, shiny, new. I pushed the thought away. Maybe they'd gotten other donations. Maybe the van was a fraction of the cost. I was being cynical. Months passed. Jenna sent occasional updates, but they became less frequent, less detailed. The photos stopped. The stories dried up. When I'd ask, she'd say she was overwhelmed with grant applications, that things were busy, that she'd update me soon. Then came the tax forms. As a donor, I wasn't entitled to see the nonprofit's internal financials. But as someone who'd helped set up their initial structure, I was still on their mailing list for board materials, including the annual Form 990, the tax document all nonprofits must file with the IRS. It arrived in my inbox in early February, a PDF attachment with a cursory note, "Board materials for review." I almost deleted it. I wasn't on the board. It wasn't my business. But curiosity, that old devil, made me open it. I scanned the numbers. Total revenue, $340,000. Total expenses, $335,000. Operating surplus, $5,000. Healthy enough. Then I looked closer. Under program services expenses, the amount was $120,000. That's the money actually spent on the mission, the after-school programs, the mentorship, the kids. The rest, $215,000, was listed under management and general expenses and fundraising. My stomach tightened. I dug deeper. Salaries. Jenna's compensation was listed as $95,000 for a nonprofit with $340,000 in revenue. That's nearly 30% of the budget going to one person. Not outrageous, but high. Then I saw the line item. Vehicle purchase. $48,000. That van. It was listed under management and general expenses, not program services. The van wasn't for the kids. It was for what? Jenna's commute? Board meetings? I kept scrolling. Travel and conferences. $22,000. Professional fees. $18,000 to a law firm I didn't recognize. Marketing and branding. $15,000. The program services, the actual work with kids, was barely a third of the budget. And my $50,000? It wasn't earmarked anywhere specifically. It had just vanished into the general fund, paying for salaries and conferences and a van that probably sat in Jenna's driveway. I felt sick. Not angry yet, just sick. This was my friend. The woman who'd cried on the phone, who'd promised to make me proud. Was she running a charity, or was she running a lifestyle? I did something I'd never done before. I started digging. Public records, state filings, LinkedIn profiles of the board members. What I found was damning. The board of Bright Horizons consisted of Jenna, her husband, and 2 friends from college with no nonprofit experience. The law firm that received $18,000 was run by her brother-in-law. The marketing and branding firm shared an address with her husband's consulting business. I was looking at a shell. A family business masquerading as a charity. The kids, the ones in the photos, the ones with the testimonials, were real. I tracked down one of the families, a single mother named Diane whose son had attended Bright Horizons for 6 months. When I called her, she was confused. The program? It was great while it lasted. But they cut it back last year. Only 2 days a week now, and the bus stopped coming. My son had to drop out.
2 days a week.
The bus stopped coming. The bus that was now a $48,000 line item on a tax form. I hung up with Diane, my hands shaking. Jenna hadn't just mismanaged the money. She'd defrauded donors. She'd taken money meant for kids and funneled it into her family's pockets. And I'd handed her $50,000 with a smile. The anger came then. Not hot, not cold, somewhere in between. A steady, burning rage that clarified everything. I wasn't going to confront her quietly. I wasn't going to demand my money back and let her move on to the next sucker. I was going to expose her.
Publicly.
Completely. And I was going to use every tool I had, my financial expertise, my legal knowledge, my network, to make sure she never ran another scam again. I started by requesting a full audit. Not as a donor, but as someone who'd provided pro bono consulting services and needed to verify the accuracy of the financials before continuing my involvement. It was a thin pretext, but it got me access. Jenna agreed, reluctantly, and sent me a year's worth of bank statements and receipts. She didn't know I already had the Form 990.
She didn't know I'd been talking to Diane.
She thought I was still the generous, trusting friend who'd written a check without asking questions. I spent the next week going through every transaction, building a spreadsheet that told the real story. By the end, I had enough evidence to sink her. But I needed one more thing. Proof that she knew what she was doing. That this wasn't incompetence, it was fraud. So, what's my next move? Do I confront her directly with the evidence? Do I go to the IRS? Or do I have something even more public in mind? Let me know your strategy in the comments. Part 2 is where the investigation deepens and the true scope of the deception becomes clear.
Subscribe.
The bank statements told a story the tax forms couldn't. Month after month, checks written to cash in round amounts, $2,000 here, $3,500 there. Withdrawal slips signed by Jenna herself. No receipts, no explanations, no program expenses attached. Just cash, disappearing from a nonprofit bank account. I cross-referenced the dates with her personal social media. The $3,500 withdrawal in March? That was the week she posted photos from a spa weekend in Napa. The $2,000 in June? A business conference in Miami that featured more beach photos than workshop slides. She wasn't running a charity. She was running a personal slush fund. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. The program expenses line on the tax form was fiction. I called every vendor listed. The company that supposedly provided educational materials? A mail forwarding service. The youth counseling contractor? A friend of Jenna's who'd never worked a day with kids. The facility rental for the after-school space? The building was owned by Jenna's husband, who charged the nonprofit above market rent and then, according to property records, used that income to pay down the mortgage on their personal residence. It was a shell game, and I'd been the biggest mark. But the worst discovery was about the kids themselves. Diane, the mother I'd spoken with, put me in touch with 3 other families. Their stories were identical, glowing testimonials written by Jenna herself, signed by parents who didn't read the fine print, used to attract donors who never met the actual children. One mother, a woman named Rosa, told me her son had attended the program for exactly 4 months before it ran out of funding. She'd never been asked for a testimonial, but her name and her son's photo appeared in a donor brochure anyway, with a quote she'd never given. Did you confront her? I asked.
Rosa laughed bitterly.
I tried. She said it was a mix-up, that the printer used old photos, that she'd fix it. She never did. I stopped answering her calls. Jenna had built her empire on the backs of real children, real families, real struggles, and she'd used them as props to extract money from people like me. I needed to understand the full scope. I filed a public records request with the State Attorney General's office, which oversees nonprofit registrations. The response took 3 weeks. When it arrived, it was a thick envelope containing 5 years of Bright Horizons filings. I spread them across my dining room table and started from the beginning. Year 1. Revenue $85,000. Program expenses $72,000.
Clean.
Credible. Year 2. Revenue $210,000. Program expenses $118,000. The divergence began. Year 3. Revenue $290,000. Program expenses $105,000. A pattern. Year 4. Revenue $340,000. Program expenses $98,000. The year I donated. Year 5. Revenue $315,000. Program expenses $87,000. The year after. The trend was unmistakable. As donations grew, program spending shrank. The money wasn't going to kids. It was going to Jenna, her family, her lifestyle. I also noticed something else. In year 3, Bright Horizons had been audited by a small accounting firm. The audit was clean, no major findings. But the firm's name was unfamiliar. I looked them up. 2-person operation, based in a strip mall, with a website that hadn't been updated in 4 years. I called them. Hi, I'm doing some due diligence on Bright Horizons. Your firm conducted their audit in year 3. I'm wondering if you have any records you could share? The woman who answered was hesitant. I'm sorry, we're not authorized to discuss client matters. I understand. Can you just tell me, was the audit independent? Did you have full access to records? A long pause. We did what we were asked to do. Look, I really can't talk about this. She hung up. That was the sound of someone covering something up. I called a forensic accountant I'd worked with on client cases, a sharp woman named Priya. I sent her the files. She called me back in 2 days. Marcus, this is bad. The financials are a mess, but more importantly, there are clear indications of fraud. Self-dealing transactions, inflated expenses, cash withdrawals with no documentation. If the IRS ever looked at this, she'd be facing serious charges. What would it take to trigger an IRS audit? Priya was quiet for a moment. A formal complaint from a donor, backed by evidence. They don't always act, but if the evidence is strong enough, they'll open an investigation. And if they find what I'm seeing, they'll refer it to the FBI for potential criminal charges. Criminal charges. Jenna, my college friend, the woman who'd cried on my shoulder, could go to prison. I should have felt conflicted. I felt nothing but cold certainty. I drafted the complaint. It was 30 pages long, with exhibits, the tax forms, the bank statements, the vendor discrepancies, the parent testimonies, the forensic accountant's report. I sent it to the IRS whistleblower office, with a cover letter explaining that I was a donor who'd been defrauded and that I believed the nonprofit was operating as a personal slush fund. Then I waited. 3 months passed. Jenna continued sending cheerful updates, unaware that the machinery of federal enforcement was grinding in the background. She even asked for another donation, a bridge loan, to get through a temporary cash crunch. I declined politely, citing liquidity issues. She seemed disappointed, but not suspicious. Then, on a Tuesday morning, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a Washington, D.C. area code. It was the IRS. Mr.
Webb.
This is Special Agent Martinez with the Criminal Investigation Division. We received your complaint regarding Bright Horizons Foundation. We'd like to schedule an interview to discuss your findings. My heart hammered. Of course. The interview was 2 weeks later, conducted via secure video call. 2 agents, 1 man and 1 woman, both calm and professional. They'd already done their homework. They'd pulled Jenna's personal tax returns, her husband's business records, the nonprofit's entire filing history. My complaint had been the trigger, but they'd found plenty on their own. MS. Jenna Holloway has been filing false returns for 5 years, Agent Martinez explained. She's claimed personal expenses as charitable deductions, funneled nonprofit funds into family accounts, and falsified program expenses to donors. We're looking at charges of wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. Total potential exposure, 15 to 20 years. 15 to 20 years. I felt the weight of it settle on me. We'll need you to testify if this goes to trial, the other agent added. Your donation, your documentation, your conversations with her, all of it will be evidence. Are you prepared to do that? I didn't hesitate. Yes. The investigation took another 6 months. During that time, Jenna had no idea what was coming. She continued running Bright Horizons, continued sending glossy mailers, continued cashing checks from unsuspecting donors. I watched from a distance, a ghost in her story, waiting for the moment when the curtain would fall. Then, on a Thursday morning, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a photo. Jenna, in handcuffs, being led out of her house by federal agents. The caption, "Thought you'd want to see this." I never learned who sent it, but I saved it. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. A reminder that justice is slow, but it comes. So, what happens now? The arrest is public. The media descends. And Jenna, the woman who cried on my shoulder, is about to learn that her oldest friend was the one who brought her down. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Part 3 is the trial. I didn't see Jenna again until the day of the trial. 18 months had passed since her arrest. She'd spent most of them in a federal detention center, unable to make bail. The woman who walked into the courtroom was barely recognizable. Gone was the polished nonprofit director with the bright smile and the perfectly curated Instagram feed. In her place was a hollow-eyed figure in a beige prison jumpsuit, her hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, her face gaunt and pale. She looked at me as she passed the prosecution table. Just for a second. And in that second, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not hatred, but a kind of dawning recognition. She knew. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution built their case methodically, witness by witness, document by document. The forensic accountant testified about the pattern of self-dealing transactions. The families whose children had been exploited testified about the falsified testimonials. The vendors whose names had been used without their knowledge testified about the fake invoices. Each piece of evidence added another brick to the wall closing in around Jenna. Her defense attorney, a tired-looking man in an ill-fitting suit, tried to paint her as a well-meaning amateur who'd gotten in over her head. She's not a criminal, he argued in his opening statement. She's a woman who wanted to help children and didn't have the business skills to do it properly. Mistakes were made. Poor judgment was exercised. But this is not fraud. This is not theft. This is incompetence, not malice. The prosecution's rebuttal was devastating. Incompetence doesn't create fake invoices. Incompetence doesn't funnel money to family members through shell companies. Incompetence doesn't withdraw cash in round amounts and spend it on spa weekends. This wasn't a woman who didn't know what she was doing. This was a woman who knew exactly what she was doing and did it anyway, year after year, donor after donor. My turn came on the 10th day. I'd been dreading it and rehearsing it in equal measure. The night before, I'd barely slept, running through every possible question, every possible answer, every possible moment when Jenna's eyes might find mine across the courtroom. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Harris, called me to the stand. I walked past Jenna, without looking at her. I could feel her gaze on me, but I kept my eyes forward. Mr. Webb, can you describe your relationship with the defendant? We were college friends. We lost touch, then reconnected about 2 years ago when she started her nonprofit. And what was your impression of her at that time? I thought she was doing something important, something good. I believed in her. When did that change? I took a breath. When I saw the Form 990, the tax form, I'd helped her set up the nonprofit structure, so I was on their mailing list. The numbers didn't add up. The program expenses were too low relative to the administrative costs. I started asking questions. Did you confront Ms. Holloway directly?
No.
I wanted to understand first. I requested more documents, reviewed bank statements, spoke to families who'd supposedly benefited from the program. And what did you find? I laid it out, piece by piece. The cash withdrawals, the inflated salaries, the fake invoices, the family members receiving payments for services never rendered, the testimonials fabricated from families who'd never given permission, the $50,000 I donated, which had gone not to children but to a van Jenna's husband used for personal errands, and a marketing campaign that consisted of glossy mailers featuring kids whose photos had been used without consent. By the time I finished, the courtroom was silent. Even the defense attorney looked subdued. Harris approached the stand. Mr. Webb, how did you feel when you discovered all of this? I felt betrayed, angry, but mostly I felt responsible. I'd given her money, without asking enough questions. I'd trusted her because she was my friend. And because of that trust, other people kept giving, thinking they were helping children when they were really funding someone's lifestyle. No further questions. The defense attorney approached, trying a different angle. Mr. Webb, isn't it true that you were never promised that your donation would be used exclusively for program expenses? I wasn't promised anything specific, but I was led to believe by the marketing materials, by the testimonials, by Jenna herself, that the money was helping kids. But you didn't have a written agreement specifying how your funds would be used, did you?
No.
And you didn't ask for one, did you?
No.
So, isn't it possible that Ms. Holloway simply made some poor business decisions, rather than intentionally defrauding anyone? I looked at Jenna. She was staring at the table, her shoulders hunched. No, I said. Poor business decisions don't involve creating fake invoices. Poor business decisions don't involve using children's photos without permission. Poor business decisions don't involve withdrawing cash in amounts just under the reporting threshold to avoid scrutiny. This was intentional. This was calculated. And she knew exactly what she was doing. The defense attorney had no further questions. I stepped down from the stand. As I walked past Jenna, she finally looked up. Her eyes were wet, her face a mask of anguish. She mouthed something. I couldn't tell what it was. Maybe I'm sorry. Maybe how could you? I didn't stop to find out. The closing arguments came 2 days later. The prosecution summarized the mountain of evidence. The defense made one last plea for leniency, painting Jenna as a flawed but well-intentioned woman. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they filed back into the courtroom, Jenna stood, her hands clasped in front of her, her whole body trembling. The foreman, a middle-aged man with a kind face, read the verdict. On the charge of wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of tax evasion, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of money laundering, we find the defendant guilty. All counts. Guilty on all counts. Jenna collapsed into her chair, her body going limp. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder, but she shook it off. She was alone, surrounded by people who just confirmed her worst fears. I sat in the gallery, watching. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt a hollow, exhausted relief that it was over. The evidence had spoken. The truth had won. But the cost of that truth was a person's life, destroyed by their own choices. The sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. In the interim, Jenna remained in custody, awaiting her fate. I went back to my life, my clients, my family, my routines. But something had shifted. I couldn't look at a fundraising appeal without suspicion. I couldn't hear a heartwarming story without wondering what lay beneath. Jenna had taken more than my money. She'd taken my trust. And I didn't know if I'd ever get it back. Then 2 weeks before the sentencing, I got a letter. Prison stationery, handwritten, from Jenna. I almost threw it away. But curiosity, that old enemy, won. Marcus. I know you have no reason to read this. I know you have no reason to believe anything I say. But I need you to know. I'm not the person you think I am. Or maybe I am. I don't know anymore. I started Bright Horizons because I wanted to help. I really did. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of why. The money became the point. The attention became the point. I started believing my own lies. And by the time I realized what I'd become, it was too late to stop. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking you to understand that I was sick. Not physically, but morally. I'd built a life on a foundation of lies, and I couldn't find a way out.
I'm sorry.
Not just for the money. For making you believe in something that wasn't real. Jenna. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. I never wrote back. So, what sentence does she deserve? And what do I do with this letter? Keep it private or share it with the court? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Part 4 is the sentencing and the final reckoning.
Subscribe.
The sentencing hearing was held in the same courtroom where she'd been convicted, but everything felt different. The jury was gone. The gallery was sparser. A few reporters, a handful of curious observers, and me, sitting in the same seat I'd occupied throughout the trial. Jenna stood before the judge, her lawyer beside her, her hands clasped in front of her. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished. The judge, a stern woman with decades of experience, reviewed the pre-sentencing report, then looked up at Jenna. Ms. Holloway, you have been convicted of serious crimes that exploited the trust of donors and, more importantly, exploited the hopes of vulnerable families. Do you have anything to say before I impose sentence? Jenna took a shaky breath. She'd prepared a statement. Her lawyer had a copy on the table, but when she spoke, it was clear she was improvising. Your Honor, I don't have words for what I've done. I started Bright Horizons with genuine hope. I wanted to help kids. I wanted to make a difference. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I started cutting corners, then lying about it, then building entire structures of deception to cover up the lies. By the time I realized what I'd become, I couldn't find my way back. Her voice cracked. She paused, composed herself, continued. I betrayed everyone who believed in me. The donors who gave their hard-earned money. The families who trusted me with their children's photos, their stories, their hopes. My own family, who I dragged into this mess. And Marcus. She turned slightly, looking toward me. I met her eyes for the first time since the trial. Marcus was my friend. A real friend. He helped me set up the nonprofit for free. He gave me $50,000 without a second thought. And I repaid him by lying to his face year after year. I don't expect him to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I want him to know that his testimony, hearing him describe what I did, that was the moment I finally saw myself clearly. It was the worst moment of my life. And it was the most necessary. She turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I accept whatever sentence you impose. I've had a lot of time to think in the last 18 months. I know I need to be held accountable. I know I need to pay for what I've done. I hope that someday, somehow, I can find a way to make amends. Not to repair the damage, I don't think that's possible, but to try, in some small way, to be the person I pretended to be. The courtroom was silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you, Ms.
Holloway.
I've read the pre-sentencing report, the letters from victims, the prosecution's recommendations. This is a difficult case, not because the facts are unclear, but because the defendant is not a monster. She's a woman who made terrible choices, who hurt real people, and who now expresses genuine remorse. But remorse, however sincere, does not undo the harm. She reviewed the sentencing guidelines. Wire fraud, up to 20 years. Tax evasion, up to 5 years. Money laundering, up to 10 years. The total potential exposure was decades. However, the judge continued, the guidelines also allow for consideration of mitigating factors. The defendant's lack of prior criminal history, her expressions of remorse, and the substantial cooperation she's provided to investigators since her arrest. Cooperation.
I hadn't known about that.
Jenna had been helping the government untangle her own web. Therefore, it is the judgment of this court that the defendant, Jenna Holloway, is hereby sentenced to 78 months in federal prison, to be followed by 3 years of supervised release. Restitution in the amount of $487,000 is ordered, to be paid to the victims identified in the pre-sentencing report. The defendant is remanded to the custody of the United States Marshal Service to begin serving her sentence immediately. 78 months. 6.5 years. Jenna's knees buckled slightly. Her lawyer steadied her. The marshal stepped forward, handcuffed her, and led her out of the courtroom through a side door. She didn't look back. I sat in the gallery, watching her disappear. 6.5 years. Not a life sentence, but close enough. By the time she got out, her children would be grown. Her marriage would be over. Her career, such as it was, would be a distant memory. She'd lost everything. And I'd helped make that happen. I walked out of the courthouse into gray winter light. The reporters swarmed, asking for comments. I said nothing, just walked to my car and drove home. For the next week, I went through the motions of my life, meetings, meals, conversations, but I was somewhere else, stuck in that courtroom, replaying the moment Jenna's knees buckled. I'd wanted justice. I'd wanted accountability. I'd wanted her to face the consequences of her choices. I'd gotten all of that. So why did I feel so hollow? The answer came slowly, in fragments, over the following months. I felt hollow because justice, as it turns out, is not the same as satisfaction. It's not the same as closure. It's just the end of a process. The books are closed. The verdict is rendered. But the people involved carry the weight forever. I started attending a support group for fraud victims, something I'd never imagined doing. Most of the people there were elderly, their life savings stolen by smooth-talking investment advisors. A few were like me, donors to charities that turned out to be scams. We shared stories, cried together, slowly rebuilt our trust in the world. It helped a little. One night, after a particularly intense session, I found myself thinking about Jenna's letter. The one she'd sent from jail before sentencing. I'd never responded. I'd never even acknowledged it. But I still had it, folded carefully in a drawer. I wrote back. Not a long letter, just a few sentences. Jenna, I read your letter. I don't forgive you, not yet. But I understand that you're human, and humans make terrible mistakes. I hope you find a way to become someone different. I hope when you get out, you find a way to contribute something real to the world. Not because you deserve it, but because the world needs more people trying to do good, even if they've failed before. Marcus. I never sent it. It felt too raw, too unfinished. But writing it helped. It helped me clarify what I believed, that people can change, that redemption is possible, but that it's earned, not given. Jenna had 6.5 years to earn it. What she did with that time was up to her. The restitution payments started arriving 6 months later. Small amounts, automatically deducted from whatever prison wages Jenna earned. $23 here, 31 there. It would take decades to pay back the full $487,000. I donated my share to a legitimate children's charity, one I'd researched thoroughly. It felt like closing a loop. But the story doesn't end there. 2 years into her sentence, Jenna's case took an unexpected turn. A journalist, digging into the Bright Horizons scandal, discovered something Jenna hadn't revealed during the trial: the names of the real children behind the falsified testimonials. The journalist tracked them down, interviewed them, and wrote a powerful piece about how the scam had affected their lives. One of the kids, now a teenager, started a foundation to help other young people avoid being exploited by Shuja charities. It was a small, beautiful act of redemption, not by Jenna, but by someone she'd hurt. I reached out to that teenager, offered to help with his foundation. He accepted. We're now building something together, something real. And, in a strange way, Jenna's crime made it possible. So, what's the final lesson? That justice is complicated. That redemption is possible, but not always for the people we expect. And that sometimes, the best we can do is take the wreckage of betrayal and build something new. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The final part is about what comes after, for me, for Jenna, and for the kids she exploited.
Subscribe.
Jenna was released after serving 5 years of her 6.5-year sentence. Good behavior. I didn't know until I got a letter, forwarded from her old address, postmarked from a halfway house in a city I'd never visited. The handwriting was shaky, the words carefully chosen. I'm out. I'm working at a diner.
I'm paying restitution.
I'm trying to be someone different. I don't expect you to care. But I wanted you to know that your testimony, hearing you describe what I did, that's what finally made me see. I've spent every day since trying to become someone you wouldn't be ashamed of. I read it twice, then set it aside. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. The years passed. My life moved forward. The consulting business grew. The kids I'd helped through the legitimate charity, the one I'd started with that teenager from the article, thrived. Marcus Jr., we called him, though his real name was David. He was 17 now, applying to colleges, planning to study nonprofit management. I want to do it right, he told me once. I want to help people without hurting anyone. I told him that was the best goal anyone could have. I thought about Jenna sometimes. Not obsessively, but in quiet moments. When I saw a diner. When I passed a halfway house. When I read about someone trying to rebuild after disaster. I wondered if she'd made it. If she'd found a way to be different. If the woman who'd stolen from kids and lied to friends could ever become someone worth knowing. Then, 5 years after her release, I got an invitation. Not a letter this time, an email. From an address I didn't recognize. The subject line: "You probably won't come, but..." I opened it. It was an invitation to the grand opening of a community center in a low-income neighborhood across town. The center was called Bright Futures. The founder's name, Jenna Holloway. I stared at the screen for a long time. Bright Futures. A name so close to Bright Horizons it had to be intentional. Was she running the same scam again? Had she learned nothing? I did what I'd learned to do years ago. I investigated. I pulled public records, talked to people in the neighborhood, even visited the site anonymously. What I found was unexpected. Bright Futures was real. A small but genuine community center offering after-school programs, job training, and a food pantry. The staff were local, passionate, and transparent. The funding came from small donations and grants, all publicly documented.
And Jenna?
She wasn't the director. She wasn't even on the board. She was a volunteer. She cleaned floors, stocked shelves, helped with paperwork. No salary, no title, no spotlight. Just a woman showing up every day to do the work she'd once pretended to do. I reached out to the director, a young woman named Sophia, who reminded me of Jenna 20 years ago, idealistic, energetic, determined. Jenna's been with us for 3 years, Sophia told me. She showed up one day, asked if we needed help. No resume, no references, just a willingness to work. We were skeptical, but we gave her a chance. She's been here ever since. She's the first one in and the last one out. She never asks for anything. She just works. Does she talk about her past?
I asked.
Sophia hesitated. She told me once.
Cried the whole time.
Said she'd done terrible things, hurt people she loved, spent years in prison. She said she wasn't asking for forgiveness, just for a chance to do something real. We gave her that chance. She's earned it. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. The grand opening was on a Saturday. I almost didn't go. But something, curiosity, maybe, or that old, stubborn hope, pushed me out the door. The center was in a converted storefront, bright and clean, filled with families and children, and the smell of fresh paint. I stood in the back, watching. Jenna was there in the corner helping a little girl with an art project. She looked older, grayer, softer. She moved quietly, without the performative energy I remembered. Just a woman doing a job. At some point, she looked up. Our eyes met across the room. She froze, the paintbrush in her hand suspended over the paper. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she set the brush down, said something to the girl, and walked toward me. Marcus. Her voice was quiet, uncertain. Jenna. We stood there, two people connected by a history of betrayal and pain, and, somehow, survival. I didn't think you'd come, she said. I didn't think I would either. She glanced back at the center, at the kids, at the life she'd built in the wreckage of her old one. It's not a scam. I know you have no reason to believe me, but it's not.
I'm not
that person anymore. I know, I said. And I meant it. I'd done my research. I'd seen the evidence. She'd spent 8 years paying for her crimes, and then she'd spent 5 more building something real. That didn't erase what she'd done. But it meant something. I don't expect forgiveness, she said. I wanted you to see. To know that your testimony, it didn't just destroy me. It saved me. It made me see who I'd become. And I've spent every day since trying to become someone else. I looked at her for a long time. The woman who'd cried on my shoulder, stolen my money, lied to my face. And the woman standing before me now, weathered and worn and quietly, genuinely trying. I'm not here to forgive you, I said. That's not my job. But I'm here. I see you. And I'm glad you found a way to do something real. A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, embarrassed. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. I stayed for an hour, watching the kids, talking to Sophia, learning about the programs. Before I left, I wrote a check. Not a huge one, $500. Enough to help, not enough to matter if it disappeared. I handed it to Sophia. For the kids, I said. I didn't say goodbye to Jenna. I didn't need to. We'd said everything that mattered. The twist isn't that Jenna became a saint. She didn't. She was a woman who'd done terrible things and then spent years trying to become someone different. The twist is that redemption is possible, but it's not a destination. It's a daily choice. A choice to show up, to do the work, to be accountable. Jenna made that choice every day for 8 years. And in doing so, she became someone worth knowing. So, did I win? By the metrics of justice, yes. She was convicted, imprisoned, forced to pay restitution. But the real victory, if you can call it that, was in watching her rebuild. In seeing that accountability isn't just about punishment, it's about the possibility of change. The micro-niche here isn't just charity fraud. It's about the long, hard road of redemption. It's about whether people who've done terrible things can ever become good. And it's about whether those they've hurt can ever learn to see them differently. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Did they ever try to make it right? And if they did, were you able to see them differently? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's talk about accountability, redemption, and the messy, complicated work of becoming human. And if this story of fraud, friendship, and forgiveness resonated with you, share it. Sometimes, the most important stories are the ones without easy answers. Thanks for listening.